So next up, we have one of the big categories. This one usually goes long, just as a warning, but this is best moment. So this is a single moment in a game that we thought was really cool, and we've definitely had games in here in the past where the game itself is not great, but this one moment is really excellent that we have to call out. So that's what this is. So, and again, if you're worried about spoilers, this is the category where spoilers are going to become a big fucking thing. So best moment. So we have helping someone cross the Evergate from Spiritfarer, Alison's panic attack from Tell Me Why, the ritual from Necrobrista, the trial from Paradise Killer. I've written the redacted machine. I will talk about that when we get in there from Yakuza Like a Dragon. EM4 Hades. I don't know what that means, but sure.
I'll explain that.
Yeah. You can't shoot a hole in the surface of Mars from Doom Eternal, which is really good.
Best part of that game.
Yep. Deep Stone Lullaby from is that just Beyond Light?
It's
Beyond
from
Light.
the raid specifically.
It's from the raid.
Yeah,
okay.
put Beyond Light. Yeah.
The last 2 hours of 557 Remake, the sporting event from Not For Broadcast, the play from Not For Broadcast, quote, what the fuck is that thing from GTFO?
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about there, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
The quote unquote ending of Hades, and the twist from, is that the raid as well? Or is that the story?
That's also the raid, yeah.
That's also the raid. Cool. So this is actually like loaded very much in when we added this stuff. So we'll do one each. We'll kind of jump around this list a bit. We'll do one each.
Okay, sure.
So helping someone cross the Evergate. So Spiritfarer is a game about dealing with death, basically. Like that's the metaphor it's going with. And the way that's done in game is you meet these characters in the world who you are Charon as well. Like you've taken over the job of Charon from Charon, who's passed on, and you're literally shipping these souls to the afterlife. And the game basically revolves around you taking these characters, learning about them, fulfilling, like almost doing their like wrapping up their business in the real world, or like fulfilling their final wishes, or all of this kind of stuff. And then at some point they will come to you and say, I think I'm ready to go now. And you take them to the Evergate, which is the point where you cross over, and you get this kind of animation of them. Well, there's 2 parts to it. There's the boat ride up to it, where it's just you and the character riding up, saying like, kind of saying the final goodbyes and saying what their life meant to them and what you helping them have done. There's some stuff in there about the things you've helped them with and what that means, and a bunch of that. And then there's the moment where you get up and they say their goodbyes. For me, it's a really good moment every time it happens, but the one that really stood out for me was, I wish I could remember the character's name, but she's the hedgehog, or she transforms into the hedgehog, and she is... The other thing that game does is when the souls transform into like their animal forms, which is how you mainly interact with them, the age of the characters in their animal forms doesn't necessarily match the age they were when their soul transitioned. So like the hedgehog in there doesn't look like an old woman, but you very quickly realize is an elderly woman. And there's a moment where her age starts to catch up with her, where you realize that they're basically inferring that she's suffering from dementia and that it's getting really bad by the time you get to the end. Where as you're helping her along to her final moments and like seeing her grandkids and all this kind of stuff, there's a moment where she goes to all the characters when you're on the boat as you're traveling between have their kind of own cycles. Like one of them will go and fix stuff, and one of them will go cook, and one of them will go run stuff through the sawmill. She will go to the front of the boat and just kind of watch the ocean, and you go up to her at one point and she thinks you're her daughter, or she says you as your daughter, and there's this, it's so heartbreaking. So when you get to the Evergate and they say like, I think I'm ready to go, the thing that happens is the back of the boat is where you have your little rowboat that lets you kind of go to shore or whatever it is, but that's the boat you take to the Evergate. And she's at the start, she's at the front of the boat and can't walk anymore unaided. So you have to, when she says it's time to go, you pull up to the Evergate and you have to walk her from the start of the boat to the end of the boat, like super slowly, helping her along the way. And all of the characters who are on the boat, when somebody leaves, like all assemble at the thing to see them off. And you just slowly take her to the end of the boat, put her on this rowboat, and take her off. And at the very end, like that rowboat, I think I'm remembering this right, but at the very end of the rowboat up to the Evergate, like she still at that point believes you're her daughter and is saying like, thank you for helping me and all this kind of stuff. And then you actually send her off. And that moment it really crystallizes the parts of that game where like you can see that game as a kind of Animal Crossing-esque kind of happy, cartoony kind of adventure thing, but like it doesn't take much for you to take that next step and go and see a lot of what's happening behind these characters. And that was the moment that was really much like, oh, they're just going for this, like really quite a lot. And that was the one that really I need to actually look up that character. I might change this to be specifically her ending, because it's really, really it was really effective. It was really, really effective in that game.
I can understand that.
Yes, that was me. Do you want to pick one?
So the first one I've got on my list that I wrote down is EM4 Hades.
Yeah, what does that mean?
So this is kind of the encapsulation of why Hades is so good from a mechanical perspective.
Okay.
So when you play Hades and you're doing your runs, you're basically trying to get to the surface, and at the surface you meet Hades, and you have to beat him to then get out of hell.
Yep.
As you're going through that game, you go through the normal roguelike thing of getting like a little bit further each time, and the more you get into the other levels, you learn stuff and you keep going. It's all about mechanical learning. And eventually you get to Hades, and you're like, this is the big final boss, and he kicks your ass because he's really hard.
Multiple times,
and
yes.
Like, multiple times. You're like, God damn it, how the fuck am I going to beat this guy? Keep going, keep learning, keep improving, get to Hades, eventually get to the point of Hades where you take him down. And you're like, yes, I beat Hades. And this happened to multiple people, so I know this is the case. Yes, I beat Hades. And then Hades stands right back up, and he's got a second phase. And you're like,
yep.
Fuck.
Yep.
So yeah, you messaged me about this. Several of my friends messaged me about this, where it is like them going, fuck, I finally beat Hades. And then I message a minute later going, fuck, he's got a second phase.
I have to really credit you, considering you were ahead of me in most of the progression of that game. Like, me saying, like, I'm fighting Hades again, and you just not giving away what was about to happen.
Oh, yeah. I was dealing with multiple people doing the same thing, and the best thing to do about that game is say fucking nothing about anything. So you do that, Hades has a second phase, you're like, fuck, you get your ass kicked again, because he's got a whole new set of moves in the second phase that you don't have any idea what to deal with. Back to the start, go through the whole thing again. All the while you're like learning story, you're unlocking new weapons, like this whole loop is happening. Get to the end. Get to Hades again. Take out his first phase. Maybe you've unlocked more death defiances, so you have more lives. Get to the second phase of Hades and you've got 2 death defiances. You're feeling pretty good about yourself. Second phase happened. Beat Hades again. Finally goes down, sinks into the floor with blood, like you do when you die.
Yeah.
And you're out. You're out of hell. You find your mother, you deal with that whole stuff, and you get sent right back. Yep. The story conceit is that like Zagreus is so tied to the underworld that he can't be away from it for too long. It
saps your life as you're further away.
Yeah, saps your life away, so eventually he just dies and ends up back in the underworld. Get back to the underworld. Hades is just like completely blanks you and pretends like nothing happened. Like, oh, you didn't get out. What the hell are you talking about?
Oh yeah, right, yeah.
So that your conceit then to do more runs is I need to go and keep talking to my mother. So that gives you the drive to keep going. Yeah, to keep going on this loop. But as part of you beating Hades, you unlock this thing called the Pact of Punishment, which is the modification on the entirety of the game, which is basically like difficulty modifiers of like little things you can turn off and on to make the game harder, basically.
Which is the thing that most Supergiant games have had in various forms.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And it's like you'll have more enemies to fight, or they'll do more damage, or you'll move slower, or you'll gain less health from healing. Bunch of whole things. One of the main ones that everybody turns on a bunch of the times is called Extreme Measures, or EM for short, which some people call it. Extreme Measures is a thing that says when you turn this on, the boss fights will change. So EM1 changes the first boss fight, EM2 the second one, EM3 the third one.
Okay.
So most people will turn on EM first because that is it gives you a fair amount of heat, and it is the most like singularly easy to deal with.
Right.
Because it's just one fight.
It's just the boss fight. Yep.
So you start on your thing again. You turn on EM1.
I have not done any of these, by the way. Yeah, I'm still on Heat 1. So
you turn on EM1. You get to the first boss fight, and it's the Furies. You realize that what EM1 has done is you start having to fight.
Is it important that you do all of these, or is it just a bit for? Okay.
Because you need to see how this builds.
Okay.
You turn on EM1. You realize you have to fight more than one Fury at once. You're like,
great.
Shit. So you now have to deal with multiple things. It's not too bad. You can deal with it.
Yeah.
Get through, get to Hades, deal with all this stuff. Turn on EM2, get to the second fight. The entire arena that you fight the Hydra in is changed, and he also has the ability to detach himself and move around the arena.
Oh god.
So it's this entire remix of the fight.
Uh-huh.
Keep going, get back, turn on EM3 when you're starting to feel more brave. Get to the heroes fight. Theseus has a chariot with miniguns on it, and Asterius the bull has a full bronze armor set. And all the while, all the bosses have completely new moves that you've never seen before, and like you have to deal with it. Like especially the heroes fight is really difficult.
Okay.
Get to the end, get to Hades, kill him. Eventually, you get to the point where you get to the quote unquote end of Hades that I'll talk about later, which is like 10 clears, and you clear it, and they give you a story conceit as to why you need to keep doing it, which is basically Hades says to you, you've escaped so many times that the security in the underworld is clearly lacking. So can you just keep doing this, and I'll shore up the security as you keep going?
Okay, yep. You're a pen tester.
Really small little thing, but great. Yeah, you're a beta tester, basically.
Pen
but then
tester.
you also get a message. Yeah. You get a message that is something is unlocked at the contractor that is like the unlocking things in the world. And it is spend these gems to unlock the final level of extreme measures if you dare.
Okay.
So you do it, and you unlock EM4. And you go through you unlock EM4, which is like when you do all the EMs together, it's like 10 heat in total.
Right.
It's pretty hard.
Yeah.
Go through all the bosses, get to Hades. You fight Hades, and you realize he's got new moves. And you're like, that must be EM4. So like when he does his like spin thing, his like big sweep, he does it twice, and he tracks you. So he like follows you around with the sweep.
Right.
Has a couple of new moves in there. You kill him, you get to his second phase. He's got a couple of new moves, like the beam move he does changes, and there's a couple of changes in there that he does. He starts healing off of the pots. Take him out in his second phase. Goes down. And then the screen darkens to the point where there's only a spotlight left on Zagreus. And then his health power goes all the way back up. And he has a third phase in EM4 that is... any of the moves in the previous two phases, any of them can happen at any moment.
Okay.
He also, halfway through the fights, summons Cerberus as like a... like, you know how you've got the chthonic companions that are like you summon Meg and do a thing?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He does that, but for Cerberus. And Cerberus charges through the middle of the arena and drops rocks everywhere. So if you don't know that's going to happen, you're fucked, because you just die. Like, it's crazy. Has entirely moved, and you're doing this entire thing completely in the dark. Yep. So you can't see where Hades is at any moment. You just have to react to it and know where he is based on positioning.
Fuck.
All the meanwhile, the music has cut into... So the fight with with Hades has like two distinct bits of the music where it's like the Hades' theme, and then the second phase it cuts in with like overdriven guitars and drums and really, really good stuff. When he picks up the third phase, it comes back to the heavy thing with the drums and the guitars, but there are now two solo guitarists that are doing mirroring, like kind of like a guitar battle over the top of the music that is like a high register and a low register guitar that are fighting each other at the same time.
That's very
cool. And it is
cool.
this like perfect mirror of like you fighting your dad, and this is going on. It is the best moment in that game, hands down, mechanically speaking, of like when that game just shows you everything and being like, here's all the stuff that you've learned, here's all the stuff that he has done before, let's twist it, let's fuck around with it, and let's make you react to this. Also, we're going to do all this stuff with the music and all the stuff in the levels, and it is an amazing bit of design, and it's an incredible... The first time EM4 happens to someone, it is such a brilliant moment. It's so incredible, and it compounds everything that game does mechanically.
Sure.
It's just amazing.
Cool. That sounds great.
Yeah, that's the M4 Hades.
Probably also never going to see that, so I might just YouTube it at some point.
Yeah, it's really sad, but yeah, I'll show you.
Yeah. Alison's panic attack from Tell Me Why. This is just a really good moment in that series because as someone who's had mild panic attacks, it encapsulates that feeling really, really well. So it's kind of her part of that story where between the brother and sister, her part of the story is the fact that she's dealing with like her upbringing, and also you realize like dealing with anxiety and panic attacks. And she has a moment where she realizes there's a big reveal, and she basically like it's cool. She does the thing where it's like, I need to go get some air, where you're like trying not to show the fact that you're having this. She goes out to sit in the back step in the snow, and she pulls out her phone and has one of the like meditation apps.
Oh yeah.
And it's the only time in that game that goes first person. And it goes first person inside her head, and she's focusing on this app, which is trying to get her to breathe properly. And you're mechanically trying to get her to breathe properly. And like the vignetting is coming in harder, and like her breathing is just like the only thing you're hearing. There's dialogue happening behind you, but it's just like it's just inaudible. It's just bass noises at that point. And it's just this really good moment of like replicating this real world thing exceptionally well. And is really kind of claustrophobic, and I don't know, it was just a really cool moment of seeing that done very, very well.
So yeah, next, if you can't shoot a hole in the surface of Mars.
Well, we can both talk about that, but let's talk about Deep Stone Lullaby then.
Sure. That's the bit Deep Stone Lullaby. So this is part of the Deep Stone Crypt raid in Beyond Light, Destiny 2. So at this point in the raid, this is a specific point where after the second encounter, where you've learned so far that what's happened is that the Deep Stone Crypt, which is like the birthplace of the Exos, the animate robots that are like sentient in the world, it's their birthplace where they were invented and how they went about being made sentient. You've learned that the Fallen have broken in and are basically trying to steal the technology to make Exos. So you've gone through, you've deactivated the security system that lets you into the crypt. You've found the Fallen tech, what like the tech person that's dealing with the Exo thing of like trying to turn people into Exos. You dealt with him. As part of that, you have been sent into space onto a thing called the Morningstar Station, which is a Clovis Bray station that was designed to basically destroy the crypt if anything ever went wrong.
Gotcha.
But as part of that fight, you've been sent up to this station, and you go through this really hard fight of dealing with this fallen tech wizard, and fight him, deal with it, go through the station, kill a couple more fallen, and you get to an airlock, and you open the airlock, and you are in the outside of the space station. So it is raw space. And there are like it's a jumping puzzle basically. There are platforms on the outside you have to go across, and
sure.
But it is the first time in a raid where there is a moment of pure silence and like utter calm, because you're in space. It's like utter calm. You start going out into space, and then this melody starts playing called the Deep Stone Lullaby. That is a very chilling piano piece. I've put it in for best original track as well, so I'll let you hear it. But is this very chilling, calm sort of piano piece that goes on and swells into this like light orchestral piece. All the while, it is contracted with the AI of Clovis Bray that kind of manages the station, manages the Deep Stone Crypt, telling you why he did all the evil shit that he did, and why it's bad that you're here, and why nobody should have the Deep Stone Crypt. And it's basically saying to you, you're the wrong hands for this technology, so I'm going to blow up everything. And when he means everything, he means the Deep Stone Crypt, he means Europa, he means the station, he means everything. And it is this moment of like utter calm after panic where this fucking maniac is explaining the fucked up methodology behind his entire worldview, while you're doing all this space stuff, while this weird orchestral melody is playing that leads into this weird moment of panic and calm and dread, and there's all these emotions that go through that is like it's a singular point in a lot of the raids in Destiny 2 that I could point at and be like, that had drive, that had emotion, like there's something behind that. And it's still a moment, even though I've done the raid like 10, 15 times at this point, it's still a moment that in that raid, everybody shuts up. And like, you can say, like, we crack jokes, we do call-outs and all that stuff, but when Deepstone Lullaby happens, everybody shuts up, listens to Clovis Bray, listens to the melody, and just experiences this moment again. Because it is a truly unique moment in Destiny raiding that was really cool and affecting to me, that I just wanted to point out as like a little thing.
That's very good. I've reordered this list, by the way, that splits it up into stuff that we've done. The ritual from Necrobarista, so it's kind of hard to talk about without just talking about the entire story of that game. But the core premise of that game is that the coffee shop that you work in or that you run is the point where you cross over between life and death, where when you die, you can go to this coffee shop and you have 24 hours basically to spend here, like dealing with stuff or like getting used to the concept of what's happened or anything. It's kind of like it's kind of similar to
Spirit
Fair, yes. So you very quickly realize that the main character, whose her name has escaped me. I need to look up the names of these characters because it's the only reason I'm doing this is because it's been a while since I played it. Necrobarista. Overview. God. You're not even going to tell me the name of the characters. God damn it. Begins with an M. I'm super pissed that I don't remember this. Can I look at a review? Will that tell me? No, God, Maddie. Thank you. Maddie is the main character. So she runs the shop basically at this point, and she is trying to deal with. She's the way they roll the story out is really cool. Where like kind of similar to what they do with Haven, which isn't actually on here, but that like, hey, everyone involved in this understands this world. Like, we're not going to explain it to you in like a lore dumpy way. Like, you're just gonna have to figure it out as you go. So you very quickly realize that like, while she's running this cafe, there's some dark shit happening in the basement, and you see the basement as the basement's actually the intro to the game, where it cuts back in time when the game actually starts. The first chapter starts. But there's some kind of ritual happening under there with like technology, but there's like a straight up summoning symbol on the ground, and you're like, what the fuck is even happening? And the whole point of that game is the 24-hour. You get 24 hours to spend in this cafe to deal with your final moments, and if you go over that, you go into debt. Right. And if you go into debt, other people need to pay off your debt with hours. So once they explain that mechanic to you, they kind of set that up relatively early on. And Che, who's one of the other leads in there, is who you very quickly realize was like the previous owner of the cafe, but doesn't really own it anymore, but hangs about there. Basically, the ritual that they've been developing is, as people have been. Oh God, Maddie is running a basically gambling ring under the cafe, doing what's that? I don't know if there's a proper name for like the thing where you run the knife around your fingers quickly. I don't know what the
5-finger fillet.
5-finger fillet. She's running that as a gambling ring underneath it, and people are betting their hours on that thing. Okay. And she's taking these hours because you can transfer hours. They set that up very easily. And you think like, oh, she's just taking these hours like as a way to keep herself occupied, and like people don't really need them anyway. And what she's actually doing is feeding all of these hours into the tree that lives in the center of the cafe that is like feels like decoration, but she's feeding all of the hours into that in an effort to bring Che back because Che has been dead this entire time and is living on borrowed time for like and normally people will go over by like 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours when something special happens. He's been doing this for months, possibly years. They're very unclear about that. So this ritual is basically trying to take all of these hours she's fed into this tree as a living being and ritualize it into Shay every time to try and bring him back. But every time she does it, she's tried it like 3 or 4 times at this point with Ashley's help, who's their teenager kind of mechanical prodigy. Every time she's done it, she's made him progressively more sick, and it's just more like he's starting to lose memories and all of this kind of stuff. Like he's getting worse, but she refuses to give up. Like multiple times he says it's done, like we need to stop this, and she's just pushing harder and harder and harder to get him back. And it's the thing I really like about it is it ties all the narrative stuff together. It's visually super interesting as well, but it's not a relationship thing. Like they're just best friends. Like they're such an integral part of each other's lives, but it's not a romantic thing. They're just like super close. She's desperate to bring him back and keeps pushing far beyond. So
it's literally just a case of she wants this person back just because she wants them there.
She wants them there, because he used to run the cafe, and when he died, he handed it over to her, and she just wants them back to relive the old days and all of this kind of stuff. But the fact that she keeps going despite him actively protesting and said it's done, we need to stop this. And there's this internal tension between her, between him and Maddie about like, we can do it this time. We'll get it right this time. It's fine. And the fact that it's actively hurting him as well every time they fuck it up. It's just this really fantastic, like tense, emotionally wrought part of that game, to the point where we're fully within spoiler territory at this point, but the point where they're like, we're done. We've broke this machine completely. This ritual's never going to work. Shay just needs to transition. Like, he needs to just go over. And they set this thing up and they go through the portal to the afterlife bit, or the point where they transition, and it's this tiny island with a grave already there. Like Shay's grave is already there, and they have their final conversation. She turns around to do something and he's just gone, and it's just this and it's just this moment of like, it just ends. It's just all like, when it ends, it ends, and it's all over. And she goes back to the cafe and just goes back to like helping these last people who arrive there do their thing. And there's the whole other side story with the kind of the player insert of the person who comes in and has to be taught all this stuff, who's again name I cannot remember for the life of me, but like he's learning all of this stuff at the same time. Also really weird part of that game, they have the debt collector called Ned, who works for whichever, I can't remember the name of the organization that basically manages to make sure that all these cafes throughout the world are all behaving themselves. And like he knows what she's doing, but is like, this can't go on for much longer. I can't cover you for you much longer. And you see him, and he's got like, this is game set in Melbourne as well, it's important to know. And he's there in like shorts and a rugby shirt and a scarf, a rugby scarf, a football scarf, and like a metal helmet, which they don't reference at any point during the game. And then the game just ends, and it got to the end, I was like, what the fuck? Like, they never talk about, like, nobody else has that. It's not like a uniform thing. Like, he just has that and nobody references it. And you get to the end of the game, I was like, they still haven't said anything. I was like, what the fuck's going on? And then you realise, oh, he's Ned Kelly, as in the Australian bandit who was, who wore his own armour.
Yeah, who put the... Yeah.
And you're just like, oh, that's such a weird twist in there that you're like,
that's cool, I guess.
Which I think is also really cool, because if you're not, I mean, like, I'm familiar with it through just general knowledge, but also like that's part of Australian mythos that you're like, oh, that's a cool thing. This game is definitely made by Australians. That's super cool.
Yeah.
yeah, it's a really cool game, and that the core part of the ritual where like the final part where they do it is like it's really affecting that part of that game. So yeah, it's cool.
So next on mine, last 2 hours of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Right,
Yeah.
it maybe isn't 2 hours, but there's a specific point that.
Yeah.
So you get through the Shinra building and you do the drive down the highway and you beat them all.
Yeah.
And at the end, you're met by Sephiroth, who explains that you're throughout the entire game you're chased by these like ghost-like apparitions, these like cloaked figures,
which is a thing that is not in the original game. I don't think.
No, they are brand new. They're called Whispers.
Whispers.
And Sephiroth explains that they're basically protectors of fate. They're there to ensure that things play out the way that they're meant to. So they protect specific people because they're important, or they do things because they're where it's supposed. Like, for example, there's a point in the Shinra building at which Barrett dies. Like, Barrett gets stabbed by Sephiroth and dies.
Okay.
And the fates come and bring him back to life because he's meant to exist, so he gets brought back to life.
Okay.
Sephiroth comes and explains, and then says, "I hate this. You need to take control of your own fate." And cuts a hole in this giant, like, swirling vortex of whispers that have presented themselves that are stopping you leaving Midgar.
Okay.
Cuts a giant hole in this and invites you to take control of your own fate. So you have to chase Sephiroth because you have to chase him because he walks into fate, and you're like, if he fucks this up, we're all dead. Because you start having visions of like Sephiroth being a bad guy.
Sure.
So you chase him into this like hole that he's cut in the whispers, and it takes you to basically a place outside of existence and time that is controlled entirely by the whispers. And you go there, and you end up in the boss fight I was talking about in the worst moment thing, which is like the protectors of fate, and it is a big crystalline dudes. One of them has like a big crystal fists, one of them has a big crystal sword, and one of them has a big crystal gun.
Gotcha. Yep.
And you fight these things all the way down, and in the middle there's this huge fucking like swirling vortex, like Arbiter of Fate, that has giant hands, and very JRPG boss.
I was gonna say it sounds very Kingdom Hearts. Almost.
Yeah, it is kind of.
Okay.
So the things that this thing is drawn from Kingdom Hearts are weird, but so you fight all this stuff, and in the meanwhile there are bits of whispers that are like flying through you and like trying to get you to stop, and every time you do you have a vision, and the visions are things like Meteor coming towards Midgar, and you finding the holy materia, and Aerith dying because Sephiroth stabs her through the stomach. These are all things that have not happened in this game, but you know to happen in Final Fantasy VII because you're a Final Fantasy VII fan.
Yes.
So you go through this, and as you keep going, it's implied that the people that you're fighting, the three crystalline dudes, are basically Cloud, Barrett, and Tifa from a different reality that are there to stop you doing what you're trying to do, which is basically kill Fate, which is stop Fate from interfering, because if Fate interferes, then Sephiroth will win. So you go through, take out the crystalline dudes, take out Fate, you basically cause it to shrink in on itself. So you then fight Sephiroth, who like basically reveals to you at the point at which the Sephiroth that's in Final Fantasy VII Remake is implied to be a different Sephiroth who knows what's going to happen in Final Fantasy VII and has jumped backwards to go down a different timeline. So by getting you to kill Fate, he has ensured that something different will happen, because it means that like Meteor is going to be different, Holy's going to be different, Aerith might not die, like everything has changed. So you do that, Sephiroth sends you to the end of the universe, you fight him, you come back, and then the cutscene plays at the end that is showing the big image that is shown to you by the whispers is Zack Fair, who's Aerith's boyfriend, the mentor to Cloud.
Yep.
They show you his last moment, which is shown in Crisis Core, the PSP game, which is him getting turned on by Shinra and Shinra show up on the cliff edge outside Midgar and basically gun him down.
Yep.
Which is the end of Crisis Core.
Yep.
What is shown as you are walking away from the duel with Sephiroth is the cutscene comes back, all the Shinra guys are dead, and Zack is left standing.
Jesus. Okay.
And he is like, he's hurt, but he's alive.
Right.
And you walk past him as the cutscene shows Zack walking towards Midgar, and you have a moment of Cloud and Zack realizing that they sense each other. So it is the point at which that game is revealed to you that this isn't a Final Fantasy VII remake. This is a Final Fantasy VII remake. Like they are doing something completely different with Final Fantasy VII. They've basically gone, everything that you know about Final Fantasy VII now no longer exists. And it is the point at which I got super excited for this project of like, they are going to do something completely different with whatever Final Fantasy VII is. Zack is now potentially still alive. Aerith might never die. Like, what does this mean for this story now?
Meteor hasn't really been a part
Meteor
of this.
might not even be a thing because Sephiroth has a completely different idea now because he knows that doesn't work. Like, it is...
There's like multiple different readings of that where it's like...
Yeah.
If you look at it from like a pure business perspective, well, not pure business, like a game design perspective, you're like, the thing for that game has always been, how are you going to retell that story, and are you going to fuck with
exactly.
it?
Yeah,
and the thing they've done instead is gone, we're not telling the story at all, except for these first sections.
That's the thing of like, the reason that everybody was like, wait, this first part only goes up to Midgar. How does that make any sense? Because the game's fucking huge. And the reason it only goes up to Midgar is because that's the point at which they're saying to you, okay, all this stuff happened, but the rest of it, yeah, that doesn't matter. Like, something else is going to happen now. That's
buck wild.
It's so crazy, and it's such a weird idea that they've now decided to just do a different thing with Final Fantasy VII, which is great. It makes you super excited to see what they're going to do next.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so that is what happens at the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, and is a really clever sort of, not a fuck you from the developers, but a sort of like clever play on like, you thought you knew where this was going, but nah.
But
that's
also
not
kind of, because like...
A little bit, but...
Because like, I can imagine that there are people who are so attached to Final Fantasy VII that they were looking forward to seeing a HD remaster of core moments of that game, right?
Yeah,
where
I'm sure they were, yeah.
What does Cosmo Canyon look like? What does that...
what does the Golden Saucer look like?
What does the Golden Saucer look like? What is that that weird RTS fight in...
on the mountain.
The name of the mountain. Yeah. Like, all of that kind of stuff. And they're just like, you might not get any of this. You might get all of this. Yeah. We have no idea.
We might do something completely different. Like, who knows?
That's super wild. I like that.
It's a crazy end to that game that is really ambitious, and I appreciated it a lot for them to just go...
Can you imagine if
whatever.
Can you imagine if they do all of that setup and they still kill Aerith? Like, can you imagine...
Like, who knows? Like, they specifically call it out as like one of the visions you have.
Yeah, exactly.
The fight is Aerith like getting stabbed by Sephiroth. It's crazy.
That's really cool. Yeah. The trial in Paradise Killer is like the ending of that game. Did you finish it?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I got like maybe 8 hours into it and just couldn't. So there were so many threads and just couldn't get through all of them.
The ending of that game is super good because, God, do I even need to spoil it? Probably not even. Yeah, you probably actually do. Where like, the end of the trial of so the whole setup of the game has been like, you need to find out who murdered the council. You've spent this entire game collecting evidence and testimony from everyone and noting when stuff doesn't cross over.
It's the classic murder mystery thing of like, when you get further into it, it seems like everybody has a motive. Like they play it super well of like, anybody could be the person that does it.
Yeah. So when I got to the end of that game, and I'd as close to 100% into that game as you possibly can before you get to the trial. Like, I've exhausted every lead, everything's gone, there's nothing left of my thing, I know everything that I can possibly know. And you go into that trial, and I had a pretty decent idea of who was responsible, and roughly how stuff had played out in terms of like the timeline of how it all happened. And you get in, and the way it does it is it does it in stages where like there are basically like 5 or 6. I can't remember exactly how many, but there are 5 or 6 like chunks of events where you're like, who killed the council?
They get broken down in your Starlight computer as like the main objectives of like, so figure out this thing.
Who killed this person? There's another murder you discover while you're there. You're like, who killed this person? How did this person get in? Did this other person take part of it? And they split it up into all these different sections. And as you go through, like the first section, you present all your evidence. Everyone on the island is still there, and everyone has their conversation. Everyone says, "Of course, it's not me. It couldn't have been me because of X, Y, and Z."
Yeah.
And you throw all this kind of stuff, and you leave the first section. And every section, you accuse someone, and then the judge looks at all your evidence and goes, "This is a bulletproof argument. They must be guilty." And by the end of the first section, you're like, "It was you. I'm pretty sure it was you." And they do it, and she just fucking breaks, like she just like pupils disappear. She just goes like fucking like, "How dare you? I am responsible. I knew what I was doing. I was doing it for the best of the island," all this kind of stuff. And so you get that bit, and then you're like, "Oh, okay, we've got to resolve all these other threads." You get the next thread, and it's like, "Well, this thread was this person, and I'm reasonably confident it was this other person." And you accuse them, and they're like, "This is undeniable. They are guilty." And then they go, "Fuck, I told you this was going to happen," pointing back at the first person. Like, she was responsible for getting them to do it, and it was all her plan. And it just keeps escalating out. There's one person who was in charge of all of this stuff, and everyone was just like blackmailed into helping her. And it's just like, it's just complete chaos. So by the time you get to the end of it, and there's multiple ways this can play out, and basically you can accuse anyone of being guilty.
Yeah.
And unless you've got like zero evidence, since you don't have anything better and they can't really defend themselves, they're basically guilty. And at that point, like, the judge is also the executioner, and it's just like, well, no, actually, no, that's not true. You get a gun that is like justice, I think it's actually called, which is like, yeah, like, if you're guilty, the punishment for this crime is death. So like, by the time you get to the end of the 7 threads, there are like 6 guilty people out of the 12 of this island. Right. And you're just like, do you wish to enact justice? And you're just like, poof, gone, poof, gone. And you're just massacring people in this thing. Some of them are your friends. Like, some of them you've known for a long time. And you're like, well, they're definitely guilty. And it's just this complete fucking massacre in this trial thing.
That's...
And it's just...
I will say that is like Danganronpa level stupid. Like, the trials in Danganronpa get that crazy. Like, it is. Yeah, I really appreciate that.
The one thing that kind of lets it down a little bit is that you can decide. I'm trying to remember exactly how they phrase it, but the way you can basically sentence them to death, or you can sentence them to exile. Which means they,
right?
I mean, in the narrative of the game, it's like they don't go on to the next island; they stay here. I think is how that works. So they don't get to progress basically, and are destined to stay here or cannot continue with the rest of the project. You can also, once you're done with that, once you've said they can go to exile, the game goes back to like you can walk around the island and go. The people who are left standing, you can go back and talk to them. And at that point, you can also just execute them.
Oh, excellent.
So, like,
cool.
This is a dialogue option. This is like, change my mind. Or, like...
Change my mind, it was you.
Or you can do it to be like... originally, my thought was going to be, like, can you prevent somebody from being executed at the trial in order to goad somebody else into doing something to then execute them later?
Yeah, they get them later,
Yeah. But also, like, the thing you can do is you can also just say to somebody, look, just run, just go. Like, I'm good. They don't tell you that. And it would have made much more narrative sense for the way I was playing the main character, that there are specific people who I would not dispense justice there. And afterwards I was like, look, you need to just fucking go. You need to get out of here because I can't do that. But that whole trial is so... And also, like, it's got the Persona graphics thing of, like, they're just big words just shooting across the screen. There's, like, all this, like, graphic design all happening all the time. And it's just, like, it's just chaos. It's just absolute chaos, and it's super enthralling, and it's a great way to end that game. I really enjoyed it. Let's see what's left. I'll very quickly do the. No, actually, no. You should do the next one because actually the Yakuza one's kind of big potentially.
Sure. So my next one is the sporting event for Not Broadcast. Oh, I'm so excited to talk about this. Right. So the whole time you're playing Not for Broadcast, as a news producer, they're constantly talking about this sporting event that is going to happen as like a way to unify the nation. Like everybody wants to watch this. It's going to be super important, and it's just like one of the biggest things in the calendar. You go in the day, and they say, we're going to handle the outside broadcast for this sporting event for the news. Mm-hmm. You have access to all the cameras inside the sporting event and also the outside camera to our man in the field. Okay. So you're basically going to be producing it for this channel.
Gotcha.
And you're like, right, cool, this is super important. We're going to do this. It's going to be great. Get into it, and the sporting event starts, and you cut to your outside broadcast man, and he talks about how like this is the final to a like long tournament that has happened over the course of months, and now we have the two best athletes in the country ready to vie for the championship. Cut to the cameras inside the thing, and it is like two cameras, one on each of the competitors, and you cut to the first one, and they introduce the person, and they have like dumb Monty Python names, like it's Himbley Splimble and stuff like that, like these dumb names.
Yep.
So they cut to the first one, and it's this woman, and they talk about her past and how like she has amazing technique and like newcomer to the game that's never seen anything. And they cut to the next person, it's like some guy, and it's like, oh, the old stalwart that's been here many times is going to be like a battle of the old versus the new.
Right.
And then you go cut to the wide shot. So you cut to the wide shot, and you see what the sporting event is, and all you see is these two people behind red rope with a referee in the middle and a big plastic bin, and they're like, and you're like, okay, so they start the sporting event, and they meet at the referee, and they sort of have like a back and forth and stuff. All the while you're meant to be like cutting between cameras and getting good angles and stuff. Cut to the start of the sporting event, they go back behind their ropes, and you very quickly realize the sporting event is two people in the most flamboyant way possible trying not to throw beanbags into a bin.
Not to throw beanbags into a bin.
Not to throw beanbags into a bin. If they throw the beanbag into the bin, it's a foul. So they are, and it is the craziest, most British sense of humor bullshit, where it is like people like throwing it behind their back, like under their leg, doing fancy spins, all the while just like fucking throwing beanbags at this bin. And like the referee is taking it super seriously, where he's like holding his hand up and like measuring stuff and like looking for seeing things touching the bin and like calling in outside refs and stuff. And it's hilarious to sit and watch these people take it seriously, and every so often you get to cut back to your guy doing the outside broadcast, and he's got his stick mic, and he's looking in the camera, he's like looking over at the field, and somebody would do something, and he turns back to the camera and goes, oh my, that was a bold move, let's see what happens next, and turns back to the event. Like he's giving no context whatsoever, he's just like, that's interesting, and turns back. And I was dying with laughter at how good this thing was being handled, because they have a whole like scandal, like some people does like an illegal move and stuff like that. Like it's brilliant, and it ties back into the bigger narrative, because there's a whole thing about since the far right left government has come into power, all the rich are obviously like super scared.
Sure.
So there are these protests of the ultra rich that are happening in the country, where they're all like getting naked and saying like don't take our money, but they're wearing like really fancy monocles and top hats and stuff like that.
Right.
And like a bunch of streakers rush the pitch. The pitch, by the way,
okay.
The pitch, by the way, is just like a fucking like town hall somewhere in Middle England. Like it's some random fucking hall somewhere. These streakers rush the pitch that are in like top hats and pigs, and you get a message in your ear that's like, do not show nudity on TV, get these streakers off screen. So you have to like cut around the streakers, because they're just like walking around the hall, so they're in like every shot, so you have to jump between things really quickly. And it was a struggle to finish that episode, because it was so funny. like I was dying with laughter at the end of it. It was so brilliant.
It
Like
really
the combination of those guys, the guys taking it super seriously as the sporting people, the sport itself being horrifically dumb, the outside broadcast guy being there as their sports guy but providing no context for the sport whatsoever and is just going, that's interesting, is great. And then the streakers, it's just brilliant. It's such a well shot thing.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot of that
it's
game.
Amazing.
It sounds like a lot of that game could be. The humor in that game could be done really cheesily. It feels like they really nailed. Like
they've got that sense of humor that they're going for. They have got to a T. Like
Right.
they know exactly what they're doing. It's perfect. It's so perfect for what that thing is.
Yeah.
And it is. Yeah, it's amazing. It's so funny. It's
Sure.
like everybody needs to play this game just to see it. 'Cause it's so
need
good.
to-
But yeah.
for sure. So the Yakuza one, how far did you? I only put redacted in here because I knew you were playing that game and I didn't want to give this bit away.
I
While you
got
were
to the
playing
point
it?
where I unlocked the like management bit.
Okay.
Where you like manage businesses. I got to that and then
So had you
haven't played
started?
anymore.
Had the team started working in the warehouse yet?
No.
Okay.
I thought.
So the kind of one of the God, there's like 7 layers to this game, the story of this game. But like one of the initial parts that gets the team together is the person who kind of helped you originally is murdered, or they claim it as suicide, but they know they know that they were murdered, and you're basically trying to track down the person who murdered them. And one of the ways you do that is you know that they work for one of the mafias. One of the triad, they're not the triad,
Yeah.
because the triad's a specific thing, but the 3 mafia groups that work here,
That are working
in this area, one of them is probably responsible, and they run a import-export business. So you go in undercover as to work in this warehouse to try and figure out what the fuck's going on. And one of the things you discover is that there is no way that this warehouse makes money. Like absolutely zero.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. They are importing a bunch of stuff and selling it for basically at cost in cash.
Okay. So zero profit.
So there's zero way they could be making any profit in this, possibly even losing money, and yet this thing is like the cornerstone of how they fund themselves. And you're like, what the fuck is even happening here? And you like open one of the, because one of the things you get in there when you see this, you don't even know what they're exporting, and you crack it open and it's like, oh, this is like rare food, or like rare ingredients that they're then selling to the restaurants in the area. But like it seems super expensive and they're selling it for nothing. Like how is this fucking even working? And then you open one of the crates and underneath a bunch of it is just like sheets of paper, but like good quality paper, and you're like, what the fuck is even happening there? And you witness a trade that's happening where like the person who did the importing comes up to the desk and is like, hey, here's my invoice, pay me. And one of your team is working behind the desk, or they're posing as somebody working behind the desk, and they go to the safe and they're like, oh, they called the supervisor, or like, oh, they don't have any, there's no money in the safe, I can't pay this guy. And the guy in charge goes, oh, okay, I'll deal with it. Disappears up to the office in this warehouse, comes back down with a briefcase full of money. And you're like, okay, so is there another like safe up there or something like that? It says, don't worry about it, it's fine. And you basically come to the conclusion that they're pressing money, they're faking money, forging money, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, this is the way we get to expose them, right? Because if we can get one of these fake bills out, take that to the police, that gives the police enough to raid this thing and shut the whole thing down and get in there. So there's this whole thing. And get to the point where you get the bill out, or you try and get the bill out and they catch you and there's this big boss fight and the whole warehouse explodes, right? And you're just like, well, that's the end of that, right? They're done, right? They can't make their money anymore. This import business is gone. That's the punishment, right? And then one of the other triads appears and you start having interactions with them and you get knocked out and taken into their inner layer. And it's this like kind of weirdly like high-tech place where they have a room where they basically are watching every security camera in the area, because their whole thing is they're trading information. So like they're watching everything that's happening or selling this on. That's how they make their money. And you just go into this back room and there's just this giant, incomprehensibly weird machine that looks like, you know, like the picture, the like you've seen like car building robots with like the arms.
Yeah.
It's
the
like
arms,
that,
yeah.
but they're like kind of looks like a 3D printer with those arms, but also like stuff's levitating in the middle of it, and it's like super high tech, and it's green, and it's like, what the fuck is this? And it's like, no. This is where we make the fake money. And you're like, what the fuck? What? So they're not. So when he goes up to the roof to get the thing down, he's just getting the fake money. Like, he's just got it stored up there. This other group are actually the people making money.
The ones that make the fake money.
Incomprehensible machine with, like, lasers. And it's super high quality and is like, you have to really know what you're doing to see the forgery. And it's this insane machine that they've got sitting in their back thing where they're just making all this fake money. And also, that's the point where the story turns. And, like, the whole story up to that point has been, like, the only reason this area exists is because these three factions basically have mutually assured destruction, where if any one of them makes a move on any of the other ones, all of this falls apart because they're all just like self-supporting on each other. So the fact that you say, wait, so you're like, wait, you're making fake money and these guys are also making fake money? How the fuck does that matter? And says, no, we're responsible for all the fake money. And they just, and you're just like, what the fuck is even happening? And then immediately after that, once you get out of that, that's the point where you're like, you're supposed to track something down for a different part of the story, and you walk into a room and the heads of all three families are sitting having dinner, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? It's like, no, we all work together because the actual bad person is the mayor of the town, and you're just like, what the fuck is even going on? And it just but the moment for me, it was like, a lot of that game has been up to that point like Yakuza craziness, but they've storified a lot of it as like, a lot of this is happening in Ichi's head because he likes video games, and we talk about it in the video that we did about it. But this is the first one where it's like, there is no way this is happening in Ichi's head. This is actually happening, and you've got some insane machine that's printing money, and also all of the story revolves around this dumb fucking thing. It's glorious. It's absolutely brilliant.
Amazingly well.
And it takes 6 hours for all of this stuff to resolve, and you're just like, I have zero idea how any of this is going to go, and it never goes the way you're expecting it to go. It's brilliant.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Right.
Another
one from Not For Broadcast is The Play. So this was part of the setup of the story. This far left group called Advance, who've taken over, have put out a statement to say that they are contributing back to society by funding the arts. So they are giving a lot of funding to artists to go and create art for society to help like everybody get used to the change. But because it is like incredible socialism, like supreme socialism, they've basically given money to anybody that asks for it. And one of the people that have asked for it is this theatre troupe who primarily do, you know, the sort of people that would like come to your primary school and do like Stranger Danger stuff?
Oh god, yeah, okay, yep,
So it's a group like that who have taken the money to go and make a play like for the people. They have been brought onto the show as like a look at the good work that Advance are doing for the UK. These artists are going to come in and they're going to show us their part of their play that is going to be done up and down the country. So is this Amdram theatre group doing this play about? It's basically about like not ostracizing people and being nice and making friends. So it's basically like a play for primary school kids, done across the country.
Of course.
And you have been given the task of producing the play for the live audience in the theatre. So you're producing it to go out. So you have to do your cuts to dialogue. So you have to like cut to the right person who's talking and doing all this stuff. And obviously it's awful. Like it's a terrible, terrible play.
Yeah.
Because it's amateur dramatics and they're all terrible. And it's like it's one of the worst things you've ever seen. And then there is a halfway through the first act of the play, they cut to doing a song, because of course they have to do a song. About like friendship and being nice to people and stuff like that. And you then get told, oh yeah, the audience will really like it if you cut this well, like fitting to the music and stuff like that. And so you get told that you should like cut to the beat and stuff like that. And what you realize that you're actually doing is making a music video, but for this terrible amateur dramatic song about friendship for kids.
Excellent.
And it is the worst thing you've ever heard, but it's so funny. And like people are forgetting their lines. People have like a mental breakdown halfway through. Like it's brilliant, and the interview that they do before the play is amazing as well. Like there are people taking it really seriously, and then there are people who are just like, I don't know why we were given this money, and it's brilliant. It's just it's another like amazing moment in that game where you can see that they're taking the mechanics and twisting it on its head, but they're doing it for a really dumb joke, which I really appreciate.
Sure.
Yeah, it's great. It's so good. That's kind of it.
Yeah, the two I've got here are pretty small. Riding the Pipe in Deep Rock Galactic is basically just the pipe thing I talked about earlier. The type,
yeah, we
the
use
pipe
skate
game
on
mode.
pipe.
And this the idea that like they solved this mechanical problem in a really dumb, cool way of just being like, why can you skate on them? I don't know. You've got a skateboard. Fucking go for it.
Because you can.
Is
it actually on a skateboard, or is it?
It's not a skateboard. It's like a mechanical platform that just suddenly appears for no reason.
Sure.
Okay. It's essentially
great.
a skateboard. It's great. And then the Doctor phase change from Other Side is just it's kind of the moment we've talked about with a couple of things so far of like the Doctor bot, which is the first boss, has a phase change halfway through where they take the already ridiculous soundtrack for that first boss fight, and that's the point where they add the vocals that are just so intense and just so huge that you're just like, oh, okay, we're going for this, huh? Got you.
Yeah.
This is a really cool moment in that game.
Cool moment.
So
I've got left. Oh, right, the ending to Hades. Right, so the ending is in air quotations on our thing.
Yeah.
Because this is the first
Which ending is this? Yeah.
So this is the ending where the credits roll.
Right.
Which is not the final ending, but this is the credit rolling ending.
Okay.
So I've said before, you had to go and do these runs to go and meet your mother. And you basically, over the course of you doing the runs and going to meet your mum, you learn the story of Persephone and Hades and how Zagreus came into being.
Sure.
And why that was not the best idea. You learn a whole bunch of stuff about like how Zagreus was stillborn and Persephone thought that her child had died, so ran away, and that's how she ended up on the surface. But you were actually brought back to life by Nyx. The whole story of how Persephone and Hades actually came to be a thing, like an item, where like Persephone was basically given to Hades by Olympus. The fact that when Persephone discovered that she was pregnant, she thought she never could be, but if anybody on Olympus ever found out, there would be hell, and basically there'd be like war between Olympus and Hades.
Gotcha.
You learn all this stuff over the course of iteration, and the story, as it gets revealed as you talk to Persephone and Hades and stuff, is basically a lot of the story revolves around how do dysfunctional families come together, like how in a group of people that all have these problems with each other, how do people unite? Like it's all about a lot of the stories, and a lot of the side stories are about uniting people and like bringing them together despite all of their problems, which you see in the side story of like Orpheus and Eurydice and Achilles and Patroclus and all these things.
Yeah.
But it's the main story is between these people, and you get to your mum at the final moment after the 10th run, and she's there, and you've explained the whole story, and you've explained that Hades actually still really loves her even after everything that's happened. It's just they do love each other. It's just these circumstances have driven them to this situation, and you get there, and your mother has like got a bunch of boxes packed, and you explain everything to her, and she says, I've decided to come back to the underworld. And Zagreus is over the moon and says like, oh, I'm gonna get my mother back, and we're gonna like go and talk to Hades and stuff. And he's like, how do we get back? And it's like, it's okay, I've taken care of it. And Charon turns up on his boat outside your mum's house and ferries you back to the underworld.
Right.
All the while this song called In the Blood is playing, which is an Ashley Barrett and Darren Korb duo again. That's really, really good. I'll talk about it more in the original track, but does this whole thing. It like takes you through all the areas that you've been through. So you go through Elysium and you go through Tartarus and all these things. All the credits are rolling, and you get to the door of the House of Hades, and you walk through the front door, and you basically expect everything to go wrong. You expect Hades to like fly off the handle, and you get there, and Hades is standing at the front door, and Persephone's there, and they have a really honest conversation about their relationship and how they both still really care for each other, but the circumstances drove them apart, and really long sequence. And the game basically ends with the family becoming reunited, and they understand that everybody has flaws and everybody has made mistakes, but at the end of the day, they're a family of people that love each other and should be together. And the game ends with the game shows you a family portrait of you and your Persephone and Hades and Cerberus as like a family portrait, and they're all happy and smiling, and like everything's great. And you walk out the door into the house of Hades, and like Persephone's talking to your dad, and Hades actually like starts giving you compliments and starts like talking to you like a human being. Persephone's there as like a really nice medium of like all the people are obviously wanting to see Persephone because she's not been in the underworld for years. So like you get to see her interactions with like Meg and Deusa and all these people that are really genuine about her place in the underworld and stuff like that. It's a surprising end to that game where when you expect the twist to be this all goes wrong for everybody, it doesn't. And it's just really nice. Like there is this really heartfelt family moment at the end.
Okay.
It's a lovely little bit of moment that really caps off the like first ending to that game.
Sure.
There's another part of story after it that expands on it.
Sure.
But yeah, it's an excellent bit.
I very quickly added something that I can talk about very briefly.
Oh, okay. Sure.
From Cyberpunk, where it's basically the end of Judy's storyline.
So I don't get this because I was a male.
Yeah, I was playing a female character.
Only thing.
Yeah, so you wouldn't have seen this. So Judy's one of the potential love interests in that game, and the end of her storyline. After you've done a bunch of the rest of her storyline is not really related to this. It's more just a case of like you've been on adventures together and have grown closer. But the final mission, the final thing with her, so you learn kind of early on with Judy that she goes scuba diving. Like that's one of her interests, and she says, "Hey, meet us out here, out in the middle of nowhere, or just outside the city at this place, and we'll go diving." So okay, sure. Or no, she actually says, "I want to try something because she does BD recordings." So she's like, "Hey, I want to try. I've developed something. I want to try it. If you want to come out," and you go out, and she's got like this little cottage is a generous word, but like shack out there, where she goes scuba diving, and like. V at that point goes like, this water's like toxic, right? This is a real heavy duty fucking suit, don't worry about it. And there's a setup for like why you're doing this, and basically that she thinks she's figured out a way to merge two BD streams into the one so that you'd get two people's emotions rather than just the one, and all this setup. But that's not really the important bit. The important bit is like what happens and how she tests it is you basically you go diving in that water. And you go a little bit, and then you come to like, I don't know what the technical name for it is, but you know the things that like deep sea divers or deep sea divers use with like weighted platforms where it drags you like down to one of them. Yeah. You grab onto that and you go down to the base of the river, and that area was flooded intentionally by. It was intentionally. I think it was pretty. Yes, it was intentionally flooded. And you discover that the town that's underneath here is where Judy grew up. Like, this is where she was born and where she grew up. And you basically go round this town where she grew up. And because you're both wearing BD helmets or wreaths, you're getting each other's emotions and feelings. So as you're going round this thing, you're hearing her as a child... like the stuff that happens, so you hear like kids playing and you hear like conversations that only she would hear and all of this kind of stuff, and you start to get it's basically a really good way to learn more about her as a person. Like she grew up with her grandparents, and you get bits and pieces of this, and it's just a really cool, very constricted storytelling moment that is really effective in telling more about that character who the more you go on the more is really good, but it's a really nice way of telling that story, and it doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like I need to lore dump about this. It's like, no, it's an actually really good way of telling that story. So yeah, it's pretty good. And then the twist in the last
Yeah, the raid. It's a very, very small thing, but it's cool
Okay.
for like Destiny nerds, where
Sure.
you in the second encounter, like I was saying before, you're trying to find the architect, the fallen architect who's trying to make exos, basically.
Yeah.
He's called Atarax 1, and you meet him, and you find him, and he's already turned himself into an exo. So he's
Okay.
robotic fallen, and he's manipulating this pod, and you see him through like heavy glass, and he manipulates this pod and turns around and sees you and opens the pod up, and a bunch of gas comes out and out bursts this like fallen bursts out, and you realize, if you know who he is, you realize instantly who it is, and it's Tanix, who is like Destiny 1 level. Like, he was like a strike boss in Destiny 1, but
Yeah.
he is a fallen that you have killed multiple times. Like, he keeps coming back with different parts, and the Atarax has found the body of Tanix and is trying to actively turn him into an exo. So he wakes him up, and Tanix goes fucking mental because he opens the thing and the first thing he sees is you again.
Yeah.
So he goes insane, starts like trying to punch through the glass, and then like skitters away, and you don't see him. And then you go up to the Morningstar and he's there, and at that point the AI is trying to crash Morningstar in to basically blow up Europa with like nukes that are on the station.
Yeah.
So you're trying to stop these nukes, and Tanix is there, half exoed, so he's like part robot, and he's trying to like stop you the whole time, but you stop the nuke cap from happening, and a thing crashes into the surface of Europa outside of the Deepstone Crypt, and you get out, and the final part of Tanix's like exoification, I guess you could call it, happens, and he bursts out of the wreckage of this station, and he is like half shank, like he is taken the half of his body and put it on like a heavy shank,
Jeez.
and given himself like extra arms and stuff like that. So it's like the final iteration of Tanix, and you have to take down Tanix again for like the third time. And you take him out and you like blow him up and make sure he's dead. But it was just this cool moment of going, oh fuck, it's you again, and then watching him go mental at you. It was pretty interesting. It was a cool moment.
Nice.
For Destiny nerds.
Nice.
But yeah, the last two things, you can't shoot a hole in the surface of Mars.
Yeah.
Really cool moment in Doom or Doom Eternal where it goes back to being original Doom, where there's a ancient maker city inside the core of Mars, and you found, what's his name again? Hayden at this point, who's like half a robot. It's like telling you all the ways you could do it. Meanwhile, the Doom guy is just like at the platform of his fucking space base, calibrating a bunch of stuff and like hitting a bunch of buttons, and realize that on the screen that he's pointing the giant cannon that he has at the surface of Mars, like directly into the middle of Mars. And Hayden eventually stops and is like, I know what you're trying to do. You can't shoot a hole into the surface of Mars. And Doom guy fucking loads himself into this cannon and fires himself out of this ship into the surface of Mars and punches a hole directly into the surface and lands like at the foot of the Maker City. It is one of the most like Doom guy moments of him just going, I'm not listening to you. Like the easiest way for me to get to this city is to fire a hole on a fucking planet and get there. And he does, and it's brilliant.
Yep.
It's so stupid.
It's so dumb. And then the
GTFO thing is a very personal thing to me, but I thought it was really cool.
Yeah.
So I joined GTFO after, as we said, after like Ewan and all of his friends had been playing it for a while, and this was like the first time I'd played it. And we went through a rundown and we beat it, which nobody would expect us to do. We beat this rundown. No. And I was like, oh, cool, that was awesome. Let's go and see what this new thing is. And everybody was like, yeah, we've not done this yet. Like, we don't know what this is either.
This was totally new to us as well. We'd never touched this level before.
Brand new, never touched it. And the... I can't remember the name of the levels, but it was something like shoot it in the back or something like that was the name of the level.
For people who haven't seen it, when you launch into one of those levels, you get dropped... you basically all get strapped into these pods and dropped into this underground base. And as you get dropped... you get a quote from, or like a radio message from the last team who went through there.
Yeah.
And it basically says like, what the hell is that? Shoot it in the back, shoot it in the back, I think is exactly what the phrase says.
So, something like that. And we went through it, and there was like new stuff there, and it was cool and everything. And then it got to the point where this new enemy showed up that no one had seen before, and it was this like weird emaciated corpse with like crystals shoot out the back of it.
So
And
the other important part of this, some of the security doors in that game, a bunch of the security doors set off alarms, which are basically wave-based things. We need to protect the door and do all this kind of stuff. But there's a reverse of that, where there's some of the doors have like motion detectors activated, which basically means there is a swarm of something behind this door that you need to prepare yourself for. So we knew there was a bunch of stuff behind this door, and we'd set up turrets and got all ready, and somebody had hit the button and ran back, and then this swarm,
weird sort of like jet black emaciated corpse with like no hands and crystals growing out of its back started running at us, and everyone panicked. Like it was sheer of like, we've never seen this before, what the fuck do we do? Oh god. And then it was the thing said shoot it in the back, so shoot the crystals. It was just this weird moment of like, it really showed what that game did really well, which was like, even the people that have played it forever, it's doing brand new stuff every single to the point where even those guys are scared. And I was like, that's awesome. Like, that's such a cool thing to do. Like, you can,
like we said already, like that game is so stacked against you that you take any victory you can. So like, by the time you've got to a certain position, you have a playbook, right? You have like the small guys you deal with this, the big guys you deal with this, the scouts with the tentacles, you do this. Like, we have a plan, and then you just have to like go with when it goes wrong. But when it does something at you that you have no plan for, it is just chaos. It is just complete panic and scrambling, and it was
awesome.
I'm glad you got to see that moment of like, we have no plan.
It really that thing sold me on like the GTFO experience as an idea, because that was like, they're twisting it so much that even like veterans are like, what the fuck do we do? Oh my god. It was pretty cool.
It was excellent. Okay, so what do we want? I feel like that Final Fantasy VII one has to be there.
Yeah, that was fucking crazy. So
recontextualizes that entire game in a really cool way.
It also like, it twists your expectation. It was when I really sat and thought about it, it was them twisting the word remake to where everybody thought it was just an HD remaster, but they're actually remaking Final Fantasy VII, and that's a really cool idea.
And I also love the idea that they simultaneously solved the biggest narrative problem with that game, which is, how do you tell that story again in a way that everyone's happy with, and also as a kind of like, we're not going to go through this again, we are not having the discussion, we are not having all of that stuff, like we're not
having Meteor and the white materia,
we're just going to do our own thing now. And I am fascinated to know what hardcore 7 fans
I'm fascinated to see
what
happens when Zack just shows up again. Because that recontextualizes like who Cloud is as a character as well. Because he's like, the whole point is that he was supposed to mirror Zack through like emotional trauma. But now Zack's a real person again, so what the fuck does that mean?
And Cloud's relationship with Aerith and stuff like that.
Yeah, is that as well?
How does that? Yeah, it's interesting. It's super interesting. I like the Trial and Paradise Killer. I think is a really good capstone on that game of just like utter, just
sanity,
bonkers. Like we have just, because it's one of those moments where once all that's over and you'd like actually breathe again, when you get some breathing space, you realize that like, oh, this entire project. And I can't even go into the entire story of that game because it's just something else. But like, the entire project is now just like, it seems like it has 100% failed, but we are going ahead and doing it again anyway. And you're just like, okay, fine, let's just fucking do this.
I'm fine with that. That seems okay.
Yeah. Where else do we go here?
I know you've not done it yet, but you're gonna have to trust me that Hades on Extreme Measures 4
that was kind of where I thought that was gonna go.
It's so good. Like, it's a crazy moment that just it does so many things differently and then gives you a complete third phase that you've got no fucking idea about. It's really good.
Okay,
it's so good.
I could go with that. Is there anything else on here that's probably worth it? I'd say that Yakuza thing is bonkers, but it requires so much setup and so much follow up that as a moment it doesn't quite hit the same thing.
I'll point out the sporting event from Not for Broadcast is
dude, I need to go play that game.
One of the funniest things I've seen in a video game. It's ridiculous, but it's great.
Okay, so if we take those three, the last 2 hours of Final Fantasy VII, the Trial from Paradise Killer,
I would maybe change the Final Fantasy thing to just say like the finale. Because like saying the last 2 hours is really wishy-washy. Like the finale is like there's a very definitive moment that happens.
Okay, cool. I'm kind of thinking it's Final Fantasy because
it's
the effect it is very. The last thing I expected from most of that game was for it to be ambitious. I expected it to be a HD I expected it to be a remake. I expected it to be an HD remake of that game, so that everyone who cares is going to be happy. And for them to just at the end of this part 1 or whatever it is to just go, nah, fuck all y'all, we're doing this again, is so buck wild in like 7 different ways.
It recontextualizes the whole expectation of a story. And like the players' expectations, and then also justifies the whole project that needed to exist. Because like most people, when the Final Fantasy VII remake got announced, they were like, "Oh my god, they're just remaking Final Fantasy VII because people have asked for it for years." Isn't that a joke? But now with that, it's justified the existence of that whole project as them going, "Oh no, we're actually going to do something different." Like it's not. This is
basically like. It's almost a new Final Fantasy at this point, right? Because
pretty much.
We're taking these characters, or like it's Final Fantasy VII 2 or something.
Yeah, it's the world and the characters, but the story is like now drastically different.
I also really like the idea of this new Sephiroth who knows about the existence of the original game.
Yeah,
and is like
it's implied that that's what he is. It's not confirmed, but it is like heavily implied that the way he talks about stuff, he speaks as if he knows what Meteor is, and he knows that if he goes for it, he's going to fail.
Right.
Like, that's the sort of chat that he has, so he's going back and trying something else.
Did you say you see flashes of...
Yeah, so when you're...
So are they
when you fight the whisper constructions, there are whispers that like kind of like pass through you as you're fighting, and every time one of them passes through you, you get this like flash of a... It's like it's the cutscene that you know, but done in the new engine. It's that.
So that's what I was going to say. It's not the original graphics. It's like they've redone that.
No, it's the new graphics. So it's like a really high res Meteor coming towards Midgar. It's like a really high. It's the Aerith model getting stabbed. Like it's
right.
It's really cool.
Yeah, I think it might be that.
I'm with you. That thing's insane. Yeah,
that's so bold in a game I expected to be the least bold thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Let's go with that then. So that's the finale from Final Fantasy VII Remake, with the Trial from Paradise Killer and EM4 Hades for the runners-up. It also the other thing I like about that is it justifies the dumb name as well.
Remake,
where like they're telling you like it was such a stupid name for that thing.
They signposted it for years by calling it Remake. It's just no one actually thought about the word and what does that mean.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. Huh.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing.
That's great. That's great.